Enjoy the show.
Beaming at you from the depths of the internet.
This is the Temple of Geek podcast, your one stop for all things geek.
Welcome to the Temple of Geek podcast. My name is Monica, and I will be your host as we share our thoughts on the series finale of Ted Lasso. If you haven't caught up on the series, save this episode for later and come back because there will be spoilers. If this is your first time tuning into the Temple of Geek podcast, welcome. The Temple of Geek podcast has been around since 2012 and is hosted by various geeks from the Temple of Geek team. Here we cover all manner of geek, pop culture, news, and events. To our returning listeners, thank you again for tuning in. We really appreciate you being here. With me today is one of our regular hosts, Maria, and joining us for the first time is Hope. Welcome to the podcast. Can you both briefly introduce yourselves to our listeners and tell them a little bit about you?
Like you know, my name is Maria Akhtar, and I go by Maria Watches Everything on TikTok. That's mostly where you'll find my content. I'm also on Instagram and YouTube. And I love overanalyzing and deep diving on television way too much. Recently, I've gotten very into Ted Lasso and started doing video essays about every episode because every time I watch an episode, I just have to literally talk about every scene because I just have so many feelings and thoughts. But I try to keep up with everything. I also am in the fandoms. I love Marvel, Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and I sometimes do movie analysis. I'm also getting into reality television, which is like a new door for me, which I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but like Vanderpump Rules is unfortunately ruling my life right now, so.
Getting very literal with the Vanderpump Rules bit.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm Hope. You can find me on all my socials at Hope Sloop Entertainment or on Instagram at Hope Sloop and I think Twitter at Hope Sloop too. So more Hope Sloop than Hope Sloop Entertainment. TikTok is Hope Sloop Entertainment. And I am a TV reviewer and content creator. So I talk about shows like Ted Lasso. I've been doing a slew of summer TV show reviews coming up. Just dropped one for The Crowded Room starring Tom Holland and Amanda Seyfried. And so many new things coming up. I've got a review of The Summer I Turned Pretty coming up soon. So I just am the TV girl. I like talking about TV shows, but like Maria, I'm also part of the fandoms. Definitely a Marvel girly. Dropped a Spider-Verse review yesterday too. So I'm not just a one-trick pony. And while I'm mostly TV shows, I do talk about some movies as well. So very happy to be here for my first time and ready to talk about Ted Lasso.
I am so excited to have both of you here. For those of you that don't know, my name is Monica. I'm the editor-in-chief at Temple of Geek. I'm also the Latinx correspondent for that hashtag show. Yeah, so let's talk some Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is the winner of 11 Emmys, including back-to-back outstanding comedy series in both 2021 and 2022. The show follows Ted Lasso, an American football coach who is hired to coach an English soccer team with the secret intention that his inexperience will lead it to failure. The first thing that I want to talk about is what was it about the show Ted Lasso that drew you in?
That's a really good question. I feel like I just started watching it because of the hype almost, because I think season 1 came out. It won a lot of Emmys, and then season 2, it was on season 2 when I started watching it, and then I binged it in like 3 days. It was so good. So it's just, the hype did get to me, and I was very happy that it lived up to the hype. I'm also a sucker for feel-good shows, and like I've always brought up like The Good Place in the past, and like I was like needing like a Parks and Rec Good Place type show, and Ted Lasso really filled that void really well. So it was hype and then the feel-good camaraderie of the characters.
I think for me it was a culmination of things. One being that I'm absolutely in love with Jason Sudeikis. Jason, if you see this, call me. I'm single right now. But I had come off of just watching. I was obsessed with Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and one of their head writers, Ashley Nicole Black, she had been promoting this show she was working on, and it was, 5 years ago at this point. And I remember thinking like, oh, this sounds interesting. Jason Sudeikis, what's he doing? And then one of the writers and people from the show Girl Code on MTV, if you guys remember that show, Jamie Lee, she came on board. And I think I was just fascinated because the concept itself sounded so interesting. So I'm an original, first episode when it came out, I was one of the first watching it. And then thankfully that kind of started the ball rolling on my TV clout, we shall say, because I started telling people about that and got all my family on board, got all of my friends on board, got a certain number of people on Instagram and things that I would just tell, you guys need to be watching this show. So I really do think it was kind of just this culmination of things, though, between Jason Sudeikis and the concept and these writers that I know had these incredible backgrounds. So I was drawn in.
And my question to you is, what was it that drew you in? Like, was it's like the comedy? Was it like its message? Was it its story? What was it that really like made you say, I'm going to keep watching this show?
Okay, yeah. So I totally just gave you the answer on why I started. But I think what kept me was it felt so heartwarming, but in the most genuine way that it wasn't like they were just trying to make you want to cry a little bit, but also laugh. I think it felt right to them. Like something, they landed on this note between the very genuine and very like over the top. And for me, I remember describing it as, it's like a show that if you made jokes for elementary school kids, but gave it this adult concept in this adult setting, and it made sense. Like, I remember telling people, you're going to laugh at the jokes, not because they're great jokes. They're so dumb, but they're given with such genuine love and emotion that you will absolutely want to come back for another episode, another 10 episodes. And I mean, 3 seasons now down the road, I kept coming back. So I really do think it was that genuine emotion, that genuine heartfelt comedy.
I really agree with that for sure.
I think that was a lot of it for me too. For me, I think one of the things was that really drew me to show was that it was one of the few shows that I was finding on TV that was like a good palate cleanser for me when it came to like some of the other like hard hitting shows. You know, shows on HBO or Netflix sometimes are really intense and like really, you know, they pull at your heartstrings. They're very emotional. Some of them are very dark. I was watching a lot of Game of Thrones and, you know, recently The Last of Us and things that were just every episode were heavy. And I needed something really lighthearted. I had just finished Acapulco on Apple TV, and I needed something that was just as light and airy and happy as Acapulco. I needed something that wrapped up at the end of every episode, like a sitcom, right? That wasn't like these huge story arcs, something that I could just watch. And Ted Lasso gave me a little bit of that. Like, it gave me something that just wasn't so intense and I could just enjoy. And I didn't have to worry about, like, are they going to kill my favorite character?
So just to quickly add on to that, even the comedies now these days are at the point where we're like, is this really, like, I don't know if you guys watch Barry.
Yeah,
is this really a comedy?
Yeah.
Or even The Bear. I watched that last year and I was like, I just feel a pit of anxiety. Like, I don't know how this is supposed, I mean, it's funny, but also I was shaking during that one episode where it was just a continuous shot. They didn't take any breaks. That's not funny to me. That made me want to cry.
I literally started The Bear this week and I'm like, isn't this supposed to be a comedy? I don't understand.
So having Ted Lasso there to just kind of decompress, it really does feel like that. And don't get me wrong, they've tackled some very difficult topics, but it's always been through the lens of, we're getting through this one way or another, whether it's deep breaths now or whether it's going to talk to a therapist. Like, there's always been some sort of solution that it's a temporary problem. Let's fix it together. And I love that message.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And going on to that, was there anything that while you guys were watching Ted Lasso, did it teach you anything about yourself and the way you saw the world or the way you consume media or the way you want to consume media? Because for me, at least, it was like, oh, I love these shows like The Last of Us or Game of Thrones, but I also need balance. And that's something that I learned from the show.
Well, just going off what you guys were talking about, like, because you were bringing up like Game of Thrones, The Last of Us, all these like even Barry, these like dark comedies. I'm like one of those firm believers that there's just not that many television shows that write joy. Like I could probably like count them on like my one hand, and I like named them in the beginning when I was talking about Ted Lasso, like The Good Place, Parks and Rec. That I can't even think of any more. And Mrs. Maisel, maybe, like that's probably it. Yeah, and that's like back and forth. So like I just think, especially in this day and age, I feel like writing darker, more realistic, gritty like comedy and like dramas is considered like cinema and like the peak of writing. And it's like it's actually harder to write joy, and it's actually harder to like grab people to invest in someone's like journey to joy. So Ted Lasso like kind of reconfirmed my feelings of like I want to watch television shows that have characters doing the better thing, doing the right, like doing something that's asked more for humanity, and that's what I really appreciate about Ted Lasso, especially for the finale in this season. That like it always does be like, maybe it's like a little cheesy and it's like too happy, but at the same time, it's like it's always asking better and it's showing us better, and it's like I really think that that's really important in television these days, because we see a lot of negativity in the news and real life all the time. So it's like, if television can't show us an opportunity to be better, then what is television for? So it reconfirmed a lot of my feelings, mostly.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, so often these shows that are Ted Lasso adjacent get dismissed as silly little TV shows. I say it all the time. We all need our silly little TV shows. This year I just am catching up on the show Ghosts on CBS, which is an absolute joy. If you guys have not watched it, love it. I've been watching So Help Me Todd, which is Psych 2.0. If you guys like Psych, highly recommend that. But I think these silly little TV shows get completely dismissed as like, oh, they're not dramas. They're not even the comedies like The Bear or Barry or The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which put in millions of dollars into costuming and cinematography and all of these things. So Ted Lasso kind of felt like this beautiful mix between the two, where it was like, it's a silly little TV show, but it also has these scenes that will make you feel like you're being punched in the gut. And I think in this case, I didn't feel the same way about Ted Lasso that I did with The Good Place, because The Good Place was all about, you should want to become a better person because it will make you feel better as a person. I think Ted Lasso was punching at the same point, but they were saying you should want to be a better person because it will not only make you a better person, it will make everyone around you a better person too. And I just read Mike Schur's book for the second time. It's called How to Be Perfect. If you guys haven't read it, I strongly recommend you do. But he mentions Ted Lasso in it, and he says something to the effect of how he wishes he could have jumped on that ship as well, because it was so much about joy. Maybe I think I'm conflating this with an interview he did. But anyway.
I love the interview.
No, but he says that there just aren't that many shows like The Good Place or Ted Lasso where it's making you laugh, but it's also making you want to be a better person. And I think that's truly, I feel like a changed person from these shows at the end of the day, because I've watched these and I know that spreading joy brings you joy, but it brings everyone else joy too. And I love that.
Abbott Elementary is another one.
Yes.
I just remembered. There you go. Just thinking of the other shows I watched this year.
I absolutely agree with both of you. And I think that you said that perfectly, is that it's about spreading joy. It's about, just being a better person, not just for yourself, but the way that it changes the environment around you and everything. And I think that that's what draws you in as part of the audience. But I think it's also what made me realize I really need to consume things that aren't dark all the time. I need to consume things that are lighthearted. And sometimes you are what you consume. Obviously not always, right? You're not going to be like some crazy killer because you watch some, true crime or whatever, right?
No, but
it is nice to have.
That's a theory too, that if you only watch, for example, I think it's called the news theory, that because the news is so dark and always negative, that you start to feel like that's the world that you live in. So
I feel like that's accurate though, because and maybe it's not all shows, but especially when it's comedies, depending on the tone. If you watch 5 seasons of Veep, you're going to come out and you're going to start dropping some more F-bombs. That is 100% going to happen. It happened to me where there was a whole period, probably a month, where I had just watched all 7 seasons of Veep, a rewatch. And I remember texting my sister, the cruelest insult I have ever sent. And she's like, "Did you just rewatch Veep?" And I was like, "Yes, I did. How did you know?" So, it really does. It changes the way you look at the world and the way you respond to things. So Ted Lasso, it changed me because I'm a kinder person because of it. I see the world as everyone is struggling a little bit. We all have our own things. And, I always think, I started going to therapy after watching Ted have his panic attacks because I had those kind of panic attacks too. So it does change depending on what show you're watching.
That's a big deal for a show to be able to motivate, even just one person to be better in that way. That's pretty amazing. One of the things that really speaks to me about Ted Lasso is that one of my favorite sci-fi series is called The Expanse, right? And I talk about this show all the time, but the main thing that I loved about that show is the hope for humanity. That humanity, even in the worst situation, is still good fundamentally, and people will still, no matter what the situation, be better, do better, grow. Even though you have like those bad people out there, it doesn't matter. There's still good people in the universe. And I really love that message. And I love that about like shows like Doctor Who. Ted Lasso's like the perfect thing. It's because it's like nobody's perfect, but you're just striving to do a little bit better and a little bit better every day. And I think that that's like a big deal for me on why I wanted to continue to watch the show. But as we go into it, do you guys have any favorite characters, any favorite storylines?
There's so many favorite characters.
I know. It's hard. And we can go by them individually, if you know, but I just want to know if you had a particular favorite character.
I feel like I think that this is like what I was actually thinking about since I was watching the finale before we met, that like I really liked Colin this season, right? I loved him. I love that we focused on him, but I've always loved Sam, but I feel like we didn't focus on him as much. So it's like, I think it's hard. I feel like I love them all, but we focus on them differently. Obviously, I love Roy and Keely, but I also love Jamie now. I also secretly, like, I've always loved Beard. Oh gosh, so many. I just named literally half of the cast.
I think after watching all 3 seasons, if you had asked me after season 1 or 2, it would have been Beard or Roy. But after season 3, it has to be Jamie Tart. I was just telling someone that, you know, I do a ton of Emmy analysis, and I'm talking about, you know, where are the nominations going to go? There are 8 spots this year in supporting actor in a comedy series. And if Phil Dunster is not in this crop this year, a crime will have been committed, because he was, in my opinion, the best of this season. And I think his character development in this season alone was worthy of that award. But besides that, probably Beard. I think he's just the funniest, craziest, most absurd version of a character we'd love to see in this situation. So I think it's got to be one of them.
I'm really on the Jamie Tart train right now. I don't know if it's because like just seeing his character development over the 3 seasons and him really coming out the most well-rounded and, you know, the one who had done better for himself than any other character, in my opinion. I really love that. But I think that there was a dynamic between Rebecca Welton and Keely that got me. There was something about that sisterhood. As I was watching it, their friendship, like in the first season, and then, you know, there's that episode where they go off like to an away game and Sassy is introduced. My instinct was like, oh, like I just assumed that they're going to be in like a friendship, like love triangle where they were going to be fighting over who the best friend is. It was then that I realized like, wow, I'm so jaded from all the things that I've watched before that I'm so used to women being pitted up against each other. But no, in this situation, Keely and Sassy were great together, and it didn't interfere with the relationships that they had with Rebecca. They weren't like catty towards each other. They weren't fighting for the best friend slot. They weren't poaching friendship from each other. It was just women supporting women. And that was one of the biggest things for me that like I realized like, wow, my 42 years of watching television has kind of like created these biases for me of like what female relationships should look like. So I think one of the most rewarding things for me watching Ted Lasso was seeing Rebecca and Keely's relationship.
Yeah, I also had that feeling too when like Sassy came in. I was just like, oh, they're gonna like fight for who's your like actual best friend. And it's funny because like with Keely loving her, I was like, that's actually more natural female friendships. Like this is what you end up actually doing. And I think the biggest thing with Ted Lasso is it felt more realistic. It felt like you see these different type of relationships in real life. They don't feel like constructed because they're a trope or to cause drama. Like, I know we're talking about this later, but like the father relationships with everyone, how like diverse they were shown on the show. I think that it's all relatable because it's not just like one thing just for the sake of drama for the show. It's like all these like diverse types of relationships can exist because they do exist in real life. And them showing that for female relationships, it was so strong because it's a very male-oriented show and it's very heavy on. I mean, it's a boys' soccer, like a football team, right? So it's going to be focused on the males. But like for them to do that about the female relationships was like such a choice, and I'm really proud of them for doing that. And I definitely one of the highlights of the show.
For me, with the sister relationship, it was really good to see just these two women who they didn't have the same aspirations and they didn't have the same background at all. Especially in the third season when we see Rebecca just willingly be ready to hand over a check to Keely to make her dream come true. Like, I don't know a single one of my friends who wouldn't do the same thing if they were in that situation. And I think that was a really, there are a lot of issues with season 3 that we can get into, but I think they still managed to portray that friendship really, really well. And I'm really glad they at least stuck the landing on that bit because I loved that relationship, and I'm so glad. If there is any spinoff or potential future seasons, I really hope we get to see more of them because they were one of my favorite parts of the show.
I really just loved Keely's energy in general because, like, Rebecca was, like, out to get her in the beginning. Remember, like, she was, like, trying to be her enemy. In general, I forgot to say, like, I love Rebecca's growth towards, like, the end of this. Like, her, like, whole relationship with Rupert, it just gives me chills thinking about it. Just, like, her growth has been amazing. But, like, Keely, like, forced that friendship. Keely was like, no, we're not going to be enemies just because we're women in this business. We're going to be friends because that's what we do. She did that with Sassy, and it just makes sense because I feel like women do have each other's backs in real life. Like, we don't want to be pitted against each other usually. So,
and I also like that she tried to support her friend who ended up being horrible, but like brought her into the business, vouched for her, gave her a job, gave her opportunities. And I think that as women, we like do that for each other a lot, for our friends. We vouch for them, we this. Does it always work out? No, that's okay, right? But
I actually love that girl. She was one of my favorite parts of the season.
She was fun. Yeah.
Her and, oh my gosh, what is the other woman's name?
The finance lady.
The CFO.
Oh gosh, she was so cute.
One of my favorite parts. Barbara's, oh my gosh. I want to see her do a project with Phoebe Waller-Bridge, like where they play some type of siblings, cousins, something, because I feel like they look similar in their facial features and they have the same kind of, it's that very British delivery.
Yeah.
And I loved them. So I would love to see something like that. But those were two of my favorite parts of this season. So I'm really glad we got to see, especially more of Barbara. But yeah, I loved her too.
I want piggybacking off of like the idea of like expectations of like female friendships, because like after like I'm watching television for like 20 something years, okay, honestly 30 years, I also expect television to be a certain way. And I would like read my comment sections for Ted Lasso and everyone would do predictions, right? I would like to say that everyone's predictions were wrong because everyone was like, oh, Nate and Ted are going to be are going to like butt heads. Barbara and Keely are going to butt heads. Rebecca and Sassy, like they're going to not get along. Everyone just like expected the tropes. And I'm really happy that Ted Lasso like redefined it. Barbara was not against Keely. Like she was on her side, and they didn't have to do this typical like, oh, she had to go through something hard for Keely to like realize she was a human. No, Keely just realized she was a human being just by like being around her. Like you don't have to have a whole sob story to like realize someone is worth respect and like care. So I am happy that like Ted Lasso like, it may like come off like as like, oh, we expected this to happen, but at the same time it subverts tropes all the time.
Now that we're talking a little bit about Rebecca, I do want to talk about Rebecca and how the season ended for her. I thought she was a fascinating character, first and foremost, but I really want to hear what you guys thought about Rebecca Walton as a character, how you feel she did from season 1 to season 3.
From season 1 to season 3, I liked her growth. In season 3 alone, I was not pleased. I was actually quite upset, especially when you consider the way that they were taking her character throughout the season. It kind of, like the green matchbook, all of that, it felt like a red herring at the end that was so unnecessary. And, you know, I did love the episode where they were in Amsterdam. I thought that was one of the series high because there were, in my opinion, there were really bad episodes and then there were really great episodes this season. And it was really a mixed bag. So I wasn't as mad about the Flying Dutchman, as people have been calling him, at the end. But I thought that there could have been so much more with her. And I really was hoping we would get to see more of these moments where they happened off screen, but they should have, like, I would have loved to see Rupert get his, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, ass handed to him in real time on the show. Or I wanted to see Nate actually quit. And I think in this specific instance, I wanted to see more with Rebecca's these moments that she had. And, you know, I've seen some murmurs on the internet of Rebecca and some of the characters returning for a spin-off or another season or something like that. And I don't want to get into that too much because none of that is confirmed. But if that's the case, I actually would feel more comfortable saying that this was really disappointing, because I am disappointed. I wanted more for her. I wanted better for her. I said it in a video that I made the other day that this season, I feel like she was barely there. And I was doing my Emmy analysis for this upcoming year, and she didn't even crack my top 10 people for this category. Like, when you look at all of the people involved this year, she was barely there. And I can't think of a single moment where she tore my heart out the way she did in season 1 or in season 2. So I'm sad for her and her character, but I'm hopeful for the future. We'll say that.
I was actually rewatching the episode, and I realized like her and Ted were like, they really pushed them in the finale. I noticed, like, her character. And I was just like, I feel a little weird about it. And I was like trying to like figure out like my feelings. I liked the episode, not even the Amsterdam episode. I liked the episode where she and Rupert actually like interact, and they had like that food fight. And then, but that was like the only thing really stuck out with me with this episode, because I was not a huge I was not really invested in the whole matchbook thing. I know everyone had all these theories, everyone was like talking about it, but like I really was like, I don't care. I mean, I liked her. I thought the Sam and her relationship just completely like happened for no reason and then like teetered off. And I was like, the matchbook, I don't know if it was supposed to like, because it hinted at him, but also hinted at other things. So I was really confused. I was actually really confused by her storyline. And I think the finale confused me more, because I'm like, this is really focused on her and her relationship with Rupert and how, so I'm happy that she got her closure with Rupert. And I think maybe that's what they're trying to do, because in the first episode of this season, she was just like obsessed with beating Rupert, and that was like all she cared about. Now she doesn't care. She didn't want to like comment on his divorce. So I'm like, okay, I guess that was her character journey, but they completely like sidelined her into like all these other storylines throughout this. So like, I'm happy with her relationship with Rupert and that story arc. I wish they focused on it the whole time.
I saw Rebecca have so much potential as a character, right? Like, I was really excited about this beautiful, tall, like very feminine, but very powerful woman who ended up inheriting this team through her divorce, and people just thinking she was like, you know, she just inherited it. She wasn't worthy of being in the spot that she was in. She wasn't, you know, the whole thing was going to go to ruin, and she was ready for that. She was ready to ruin it. That's why she brought Ted Lasso in. And so seeing her grow into somebody who was actually managing the team appropriately and taking them to these championship, Premier League, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then also her growing as a person, realizing that she does care about this team. She does care about these people, that, you know, her struggles with Rupert and like all the trauma she's had, the fact that Bex got pregnant and had a kid when she so desperately had wanted that in her life. The fact that, like, you know, she was isolated from Sassy because of Rupert, because of her embarrassment with like everything that they went through. And, you know, I know that they were alluding to at the end with the 3 fans who buy her the beer that are saying like, oh, you're like the mother to this team. I get what they were trying to do, but I think they really missed it with that, because I think there could have been another way to say, like, she could be just as fulfilled with running a team as she could to be a mother or something like that. So I feel like there was something missing there. I know that the majority of the writers on this were male, so I don't know if it had made a difference if there was more female writers on it or not. But I think that Rebecca is a fascinating character. I think that the fact that, you know, she opened her door to Bex and to the other mistress because she understood them. She had she knew what they were going through, and she was willing to be there for other women who were suffering from the same abuse from the same man. I thought that was like amazing, and I would have loved to have seen that conversation. Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have seen her mentor them through their grief, their pain, their whatever, what she went through, you know, and turn something horrible in her life into something like beautiful that she helped somebody else through. And there was like this huge potential for Rebecca, and especially in the scenes where you see her as a little girl and then she sees herself like, as a woman, powerful, and being allowed to be in these spaces. And, when they tell her, who cares? I think it's Leslie Higgins who tells her, like, who cares why you're in this space? You're here. Now do your best to like protect this space. The speech she gives, when they have the food fight or whatever, was really impactful. And I think it was completely lost and forgotten about because I don't think they knew what they were doing with Rebecca. I think they had a really general idea, but I think she was a fascinating character that could have been really inspiring, really powerful, especially because of all the trauma she's been through and all the trauma she's overcome in her relationship and everything. So I was very disappointed in the way it ended for Rebecca. I did love the relationship with her and Ted, where, she finally realized how important Ted is to her and things like that. And her little meet cute at the airport kind of thing, that was adorable. But I think in Rebecca, it would have made more sense for Rebecca to fly him home or something like that. I don't know. Like, it just seemed like they just didn't know what to do with her at the end.
I think you're so right. In my opinion, I think they cheapened Rebecca at so many points. Like at the end, in maybe not even flying him out there, Rebecca's a strong woman. She would have gone back and like gotten on that boat and said, listen. And then it would have even made a little bit more sense if his daughter had walked in. The daughter thing kind of annoyed me because it just felt like the cheapest, easiest way to tell her, oh, you can have it all. Like, it might not be through your own womb or through your own adoption, but it's through, this other man that you've met. Like, it felt so convenient is the right word.
Right.
I didn't like that scene. I know it was very rom-com, and I usually love rom-com moments, but I didn't like the whole, oh, you just happened to find his daughter at the airport? How convenient. Oh, his daughter ran to you. He also happens to be a pilot. Like, I get what they were trying to do, but I think it would have been stronger if, like, at the end with the barbecue at Higgins' house, like, she just shows up with him. Like, that would, I think, would have been, like, a lot stronger. It would have given, like, us as an audience a lot more credit to, like, piece it together. They're like, oh, Rebecca found him because she wanted to.
Or
they didn't need to add that scene, I felt like.
Or why didn't we get to see Rebecca was at the airport? Why didn't she just go to the Netherlands?
Exactly.
Like, she was there already.
Exactly. Like, do something
And
else. They didn't have to do that.
We could have seen her literally checking into a ticket. We wouldn't have known. It would have been an element of surprise. Then we see her walk onto walk into the barbecue, and it would have been amazing. Oh, I'm also just sitting here realizing that they were having a barbecue, and Ted was all about barbecue because barbecue sucks.
Mm-hmm. I feel like they held our hands. I feel like they held our hands a lot in the finale. I feel like they thought I don't know, they've given us so much more credit in the past seasons. Like, season 2 was my favorite, and I feel like they gave us so much more in the past, especially that, like, funeral episode. Like, that's one of my favorite episodes of Ted Lasso because they just expected us to, like, piece it all together. There was a lot of, like, complicated things. And the finale was sweet, and I'm satisfied with it, but just, like, I feel like they held my hand, and they walked me through it. Like, this is what happening to this character, this is what happening to this one. And it's like, we could have, these characters are so grown, and we've seen them gone through so much, we could have assumed them doing a lot more on their own. And Rebecca's the biggest one on that list.
I also think the scenes with Ted and Rebecca in the end, I know they did that to fake people out, especially the one at the very beginning, but they knew what they were doing. They gave it not just one, not two, 3 scenes, the one in the airport, the one in the stadium, and then the one in her house, where I was sitting here thinking, like, they're alluding to something, but they're never going to cross the line because they know that that's not happening for them. And I saw so many people who were like, either just leave it out or do 1 scene. Don't do 3. It just kind of felt
right.
Not
I agree.
cruel, but like a little cruel to these people who, like, Ted Becca was trending on Twitter on Tuesday. It was one of the top hashtags. And it just, I don't know. I think the writers missed the mark for a lot of things this season. And doing that in the finale 3 times, like, it was already a 75-minute finale. And giving us those 3 scenes felt so unnecessary.
Right, they could have been better served somewhere else.
Yeah.
I didn't really like the beginning at all. Like, it felt really, like, uncomfortable almost because I knew what they were doing exactly. Because they're not going to. They wanted to hint that, like, the unspoken elephant in the room was Ted leaving, but they're going to make it that, like, as if they hooked up, and it's just like.
But I don't think anybody believed that, because at no point was there this like chemistry between Rebecca and Ted that would ever allude to this moment, right? So like even when I was watching it and Ted's there, I was like, oh, nothing happened. Like clearly nothing happened. And then you see Beard and everybody come out, and I was like,
See,
okay.
Yeah.
And then there was a gas leak, like.
And I feel like we I think Hope mentioned before, it cheapened Rebecca a little bit. Like it cheapened the whole like gravity of Ted almost leaving too, because I know people that like were live reacting to me and they're just like, oh my god, they did, like they were so focused on like are Ted and Rebecca like hooking up that they like didn't even realize like, wait, is Ted even leaving? Like people actually missed that Ted was leaving because they were just so caught up in this confusion of like the first 5 minutes of that episode. So I don't know, they had a strong point of Ted leaving. They should have just committed to it. I feel like they almost like chickened out and they went to like cheap things in the process of it.
And I think that Rebecca being sad that Ted is leaving was legit, because she grew so much alongside of Ted. She made herself vulnerable when she like went up to him and told him, I lied to you, I used you, I this, and then he forgave her, and then he still like rooted for her and everything. So I believe their friendship, and I believe Rebecca being all heartbroken about Ted leaving, but not because of any kind of love or chemistry or anything romantic, right? But because this is somebody who helped her through one of the most terrible times in her life, who forgave her for being terrible, and who, you know, has been her friend, has been there with her running this team together.
And that would have been strong in by itself. That if they just showed that one scene of Rebecca being upset, that would have been enough. That would have been strong in itself. That's all we would have needed.
yeah, I was going to say I would have rather had one scene where she does admit to loving him, but not in the way that people typically assume, because you can love someone and not be in love with them. And
Right.
if they had done that in the stadium, which the stadium scene was a little weird to me because I felt like he was giving her nothing in return. She was like pouring her heart out to him and he was just kind of sitting there. If she had just said, listen, I love you. You've done so much for me. I understand if you have to go, but I need you to know this. And does this change anything? It would have made a little bit more sense, but the way that they played their dynamic in the last episode was so odd.
And I feel this way because, like, I do like the finale, but I just keep going back and forth on it. I almost feel like maybe they needed one more episode. Like, we didn't need a whole another season, but maybe one more episode where they tie things up. And I feel like they try to do too much. And maybe that's what they were trying to, like, do with that like, sitting seat, that stadium scene. Because, like, I think it was important for Rebecca to say, you do mean a lot to me and you do mean a lot to this team. But, like, they had to, like, put it in the series finale. Even the stuff with Nate, I'm still, like, I understand what the show is trying to do with it, but I'm still like frustrated by it because I'm just like, if you had another episode, you could have done the whole Nate and that's actually I'm a little upset about this. Ted and Nate and that whole interaction, I was waiting for that this whole season, and it felt like such a like letdown. Like, give it one more episode, do that, do all this, and then do the series finale. I feel.
I agree. I think that there were so many. You know, I know that Jason Sudeikis said 3 seasons was always the plan, and it's also the reason why I've been so suspicious about there possibly being another season because they kept saying it was always the plan, but they never once, still on Apple TV's thing, it says the season finale rather than the series finale. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, this may have been the end goal for Ted to go home, but all the rest of these storylines, just like something doesn't add up here. And especially the Ted and Nate thing, like that felt so unresolved. It felt like we needed an episode where they just like, maybe, now I know Ted's like not the one to fully dish it out and have this huge argument with someone, but there needed to be way more acknowledgement than just what they did. And, you know, I'm glad that the team members went back and they recruited Nate back to the team, but there was so much more that they could have done with that.
And do you remember that like 6 episodes earlier, they were livid at him?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just like, I was really jarred by that personally. Like, I was like, oh, now you forgive him? Like, I don't know. Like,
so
yeah.
There was a point where they go to recruit him and I thought, oh, I missed an episode. Did I skip an episode? And I went back to watch if like I missed an episode where the team forgave him. And there was nothing. It was just like, we want him back. And I thought, was it just because of that little card that he said he was sorry? So much happened off screen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I was waiting for like the Kit Man to be like, oh, look, he did this for us. I think he really changed. And then, but there was no discussion amongst the team. They just suddenly wanted him back because they felt sorry for him. Like, I don't know. Like,
so I saw someone post a theory or they said what should have happened was that Nate should have quit. We should have seen him quit, and then we should have seen him go to the Independent or to another newspaper and leak a story about Rupert that would start the cogs on this, like Rupert's on his way
That
out
makes so
kind
much
of thing.
sense. Yeah.
Because then that would have at least opened the door for the team to be like, oh, he's trying to take down West Ham, or he was taking down West Ham from the inside, but now that he's out, like he knows he had to separate himself from this team. He knew he had to go away from Rupert. But he's trying to make good at least. There was just no connection there. And to see these team members go from, we hate this man, he abandoned us, to we want him back, but only because he left West Ham. Or did they even know that he was the one who left West Ham? It was only that
they never told us.
Out, right?
Yeah.
Right,
So
because even like the people, the waiters, or when he's a waiter and he's attending the people at the table, they're like, was it drugs? Was it this? So if the players had gone and felt bad, they're like, you know what? He was once part of our team. Like, let's go check on him. And then they realized that even if he had only told the players, you know what? I didn't feel comfortable and I missed what I had, at Richmond.
Yeah.
That would have been enough for me.
I almost also kind of wish that like the team, like I wish there was an episode dedicated to Nate. And I kind of feel like the same way about Nate that like you guys were mentioning about Rebecca, that it was a lot of wasted potential. Like there was this like gold mine of like character development and storyline they could do, but they just didn't do it. I don't know if they were scared or they just didn't have time, because I think this was their final season. But I almost wish like if they could have seen Nate depressed, because like that was like the most humanizing thing for Nate, seeing him depressed, seeing with his family. I almost wish the team saw him depressed. Like, oh, Nate's here, let's make fun of him. Then they go and almost like when, you know how like Ted showed Beard that like clip of Nate like falling off the chair trying to take off a belief sign. Almost the team having that real life effect where they go see Nate at the restaurant, see that he has like a beard, that he's like unraveled, that he's struggling now, he's like a waiter. If they saw it, they could humanize him. It would have been more in line of what Ted Lasso does. And I feel like I don't know, I feel like things were missed. I feel like episodes were missed in the process.
There was a writer on Twitter who every single week I was laughing, because every single week what she would do was she would do a check-in on Nate's girlfriend, Jade. And she was like, another week with Jade. I don't know anything about her other than the fact that her name is Jade and she's Nate's girlfriend. Because she had like, what was her character? Was that she was a little bit salty? That was it. And I've hesitated to say it up until this point, but I think the writing on the last season just felt lazy, in my opinion. Like it felt so, we're going to put in the bare minimum to get to the end. And especially with the Nate and, God bless Jade. I'm sure she was probably, this actress, I feel so bad. She probably had this whole backstory for her, but we knew nothing about her. And I was like,
we never saw it.
Much more.
Yeah.
And really what was her motivation? So she sees him with the supermodel and then is jealous?
Yeah.
Or then sees his worth because he was with the supermodel?
Yeah, I don't get how that even happened.
I like him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I said that like earlier that like Ted Lasso is not cliched, but like unfortunately this season they were really cliched. Like they did the whole like, oh, a woman changed me mentality for Nate. Like, oh, you're telling me that this whole time, and I hate to do like this, but like you're telling me that Nate really was just an incel that wanted a relationship, and then that's what changed him. Really, like I gave him so much more credit. Like he had this complicated relationship with his father. It would have been so much stronger if they made it about his father. Like that moment actually made me cry. Why did you even add the girl's storyline? I don't even understand. Not only do we know nothing about Jade, but like, what did they have in common? What did they talk about? Why? I can't even imagine.
Why is she the most amazing girl?
Yeah.
Like, because he says that, like, why? Like, she seems to kind of like.
She brings the bread just right when it's the perfect temperature. Like, come on.
She works at your favorite restaurant. I don't know. I felt like that's a cliche thing of like a girl changed a guy. And Rebecca too, like she found the guy. Like I felt like they went to classic sitcom cliches almost. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, well, you have stronger characters than that. You should have just like believed that Nate and Rebecca could have stood on their own and they would have been completely fine by themselves.
Yeah. And I think there were so many people who were arguing about it wasn't just because he was with a supermodel. And I was like, well, if it wasn't that he was with a supermodel, it was that he was alone and sad. And that was supposedly her motivation to join him then, was that he was a sad little lonely boy by himself. Does that make it that much better?
Or is it like, only I can be mean to this man, no other woman can be mean to him? Like,
that's giving her more personality that she showed. Like, nothing against Jade. I just like wish they showed her. They didn't even talk. They never had a conversation. No, she would just stare at him. It's like, I wish they talked. I wish they said something. I wish they would have shown some sort of like something that made it make sense a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think too, like, I felt like the Nate storyline had a lot of potential, and he was a super interesting character. Mm-hmm. There was a couple times where I was a little, like there's where he gets promoted initially, the scene, and he calls like Rebecca a witch or like a wench or something, but Rebecca's not even fazed by it. Like after he thinks he's fired because there's a new Kit Man or whatever, but he's actually being promoted, and he's like, "It's you, it's your fault. I knew it was you, Rebecca." And he like yells at her, and it's like the first time you get a glimpse of the fact that Nate's not the nicest guy, right? Mm-hmm. But I was thinking Rebecca Wilson would not have put up with it. Nate would have been, even if he was promoted, he would have been fired. And there was that little moment that kind of just bothered me. But there was other moments with Nate like that like him kissing Keely, it didn't bother me because I was like, okay, he was in his zone. He was feeling good. And, you know, this girl finally gave him like positive attention. Yeah. And I think that they handled that okay. Like Keely was like, hey, it's fine. It happens, mm-hmm. you know? But it also made sense in the storyline as where like Nate started to spiral because he was like, oh, not even Roy is like jealous that I kissed his girlfriend and this and that. So that kind of made sense. But like we never see where Nate like flips to start to be good, because you see him flipping to be bad and it all kind of like makes sense. It makes sense that he's, you know, needs validation and Ted stopped giving it to him or whatever. But like you never see where he starts thinking, oh, Rupert is not okay, except in the point where he's trying to get with his girl.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is why it's so frustrating. I actually did a video comparing Nate to Tahani al-Jamil because I felt like it was very similar in the sense of like they never got the validation from their parents, so they seeked outside acclaim, and that's why he was so obsessed with what everyone was saying about him on social media. So like, whereas Tahani realized that like, okay, building my relationships with my sister versus like following like Chidi or like Jason will make me feel better. Like she went after boys in the beginning, realized that's not actually going to help. Let me work on my relationships and then work on myself. And I kind of expected that for Nate. Like I was just like, okay, he's going to have a moment where he can't actually get the validation from his father or Rupert, who was his new father figure. And they realized maybe I need to work on myself and then go back and like work on the people that like he hurt in the process. But like they literally just were like, no, you're going to have a relationship instead. And it's like, this is the opposite of like what Tahani did. Like that, like imagine her relationship with Jason or Chidi worked out and then she changed. Like that wouldn't have made sense for her. And I feel like that's what they did with Nate. Like you're telling me this random waitress changed him in like a week? What? There was a lot of baggage that he had to work through.
I know that the girl from Girl Code, Jamie Lee, somebody needs to ask her what she thought about that, because there's no way that storyline of you're going to get saved by this woman, there's no way that storyline just flew with her. Like, I can't imagine that she wasn't there raising red flags and like, oh, guys, should we really be doing this? Should we really be sending in someone who, you know, has no character arc other than being this man's girlfriend and helping him to see the light? Come on.
And like you had mentioned earlier that it was like this season felt lazy. I felt like the season was trying to do too much. Like this is the only reason why I was like, maybe you should give it another season, because I feel like they just they were trying to wrap up the series finales felt like they were trying to wrap up a season 3 finale with the series finale. Like there was a lot that was going on, and they didn't wrap up season 3, but they wrapped up the series, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And like, I just think that Nate went adrift, and that's why it's not just lazy, it's the fact that they just didn't have time and they didn't give him time.
I think you're so right, and I I'm always the proponent of, when a show knows that it's the end, it should just be done. Because like, I think The Good Place had a really great arc of 4 seasons was perfect. Like they knew when to take their bow, make their exit. I think Bill Lawrence in this case was worried about doing what happened with Scrubs, where Scrubs went on too long. Like they canceled JD, Turk, everybody moved on, and then they brought in that new crop of characters that no one watched. It was really bad. So I think they were scared of doing that. They said we initially wanted 3 seasons. They wanted to stick with it, but 4 seasons would have worked just as well here, if not better. I think that there were so many things with the pandemic happening. And then I know Jason Sudeikis had a ton of stuff going on personally that splitting back and forth between his time with New York and like his kids were on planes every single week is what he said. And that's not a good environment. So it's just, there was so much happening that I think they were like, we need to wrap this up. And I do think a 4th season would have been so much better though.
So talking about Ted Lasso, and the show's about him, obviously he's the title character. What did you guys think about Ted Lasso's journey and the way that it ended, and just Ted Lasso in general?
So I know we were like just like bashing on like this 3 seasons and such. I will say that like Ted's story did feel complete. I will give them that. Like that was good. Like I even think that even if they finished Ted Lasso's story in 3 seasons, it would have been fine. And they kind of kept going. I almost kind of wish they did that. Like, I think they should have showed the rest of the characters later and given a focus on Ted this season. But I'm really happy for him. Like, I think it made sense. Like, I'm obsessed with like the father relationship theme that comes up constantly with it. We've had this like new age renaissance of like talking about mother-daughter relationships, and it's like it's about time we get into complicated father-son relationships. And Ted Lasso does this so well with like Jamie, Sam, even Roy hinted, Nate. And Ted definitely is like the father of all issues. Like he not only is trying to be a father, he had a complicated relationship with his father, and then he's a coach, which is basically like a secondary father to these people. So I think going back to him being a father just made so much sense. So it felt very complete. I'm very happy that they focused on that. It was kind of obvious because like everyone kept hinting on Henry. Like even his mom was just like, your son misses you. So it was like, it felt very inevitable, but I felt like it was it felt full circle. It made so much sense, I feel like, for the show and for Ted's character. So I'm happy with Ted's story, at least.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Ted is about the only character who I felt very satisfied with their ending. It felt, like she said, a full circle. I think this was, if you threw up a map and said, this is where we want to start, this is where we want to end, and that was their bare bones outline for seasons 1, 2, and 3, I 100% can say the note card at the end of season 3 was Ted goes home. Like that's what their end goal was. I think that it was everyone else that they struggled with and tying up everything else into a nice, neat little box. But I loved Ted's storyline. I think especially the way that they did episode 11 with all of the Wizard of Oz references. And it was all, everything was laying the yellow brick road of he's going home. But my favorite thing was, I almost tweeted this the other day. I was like, I wish they had done a moment where at the end of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, how it turned into Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I wish that they would have done that. But had it been like Ted Lasso becomes We Are Richmond for season 4, and I would have been like, that would have been perfect, because that way it was never about Ted Lasso. Everyone else gets one more season, and then Jason Sudeikis can go and do whatever he wants now. So that was my ideal situation. But
or even Trent Crimm's book, The Lasso Way, the Richmond Way, right? They could have just been Ted Lasso goes to the Richmond Way or something like that.
Anything like that. I think it would have just opened up the door to wrap things up in a nicer and neater way for everyone else, not just Ted. But I like Ted's ending.
My only critique, because I agree with you guys, it makes sense that Ted goes home with everything he's dealt with, the reason he leaves, the way he finds himself, the therapy, the conversations with his mother and everything. It makes sense for him to go home. I think that I was a little confused by the ending, because you see like Michelle Lasso and, her son, they're watching the game, they're supporting him, they're always supporting him, even though, she's not with them. She's always pretty supportive of him. And then there was like the therapist guy, the marriage counselor, whoever there, and he's just kind of being annoying, but he's not like, and I didn't really understand like why they were like shushing him. Clearly she has a relationship with him. So what are they saying? Like Ted Lasso comes home and then he comes home to his ex-wife's house?
Yeah. I think so.
You know what I mean?
I think they're getting back
you don't
together.
see him start over in his own place with his son, and it's just them two, and he goes home to his son. He pulls up at his ex-wife's house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they were hinting at him for sure. That like, oh, you're supposed, because I hated him in that moment. So I feel like they're just like, no, we all hate him. And they wanted to allude that they broke up and that Ted and her get back together. I just
the worst take I saw was they wrote the ending that Jason couldn't have, and I was like, I don't like that. Yeah, it felt like a deep cut, a little personal. But I think that's exactly what they were doing. Them showing the therapist being annoying and not caring about what this thing that they care about so much, and then them at the soccer game at the very end together. Like they were getting back together. That was very much what they were alluding to, I think. Didn't love that part.
I get, and I think it's sweet and all, but like also it just kind of like, I would have rather seen Ted get over Michelle.
Same.
And work towards something else and, start his life over, because he basically runs to Richmond to avoid the divorce, to give Michelle space, to this, to that. He kind of just runs away from like his facing the truth of that his marriage is ending and things like that. So I think I would have rather have seen Ted just accept that she's moved on with somebody else, and he's still going to have his son and his relationship with his son, but he's going home for his son.
Yeah.
And not so much for hopes that he'll get back with Michelle.
There's a heavy theme on relationships with the finale in this season. Like Nate with Jade, Rebecca with the Dutch guy, and Ted with Michelle. Like it all felt out of nowhere. Like the
only person they didn't do that with was Keeley, and that was the one thing. I saw so many people saying that they didn't like the Roy and Jamie scene where they fought and they were in the bar together, but only to tell each other that they want Keeley. And I liked that because I think it mimics how men actually see the world and how they actually interact. I liked Keeley's ending in that she wasn't supposed to be with a guy, at least not at this point. At the same time, then why did we waste time just showing her with Roy like 2 episodes previous? I don't know. Yeah. I think I go back and forth because I'm like, I loved them together, but I'm also very happy that she didn't just end up with them just because, Yeah.
And the only thing I didn't like about that was that Roy and Jamie show up to her apartment and say, we're letting you decide. I just didn't feel like that worked with their characters. Like, we just saw Jamie Tart go through this huge character arc, like Emmy-nominated worthy episode, and he's letting Keeley decide on who she can pick relationship-wise. I'm like, which character is this? So I just felt like that felt insincere. I can imagine the bar fight. I just thought it was weird. They're like, we're letting you decide. Like, these aren't the characters we know. So, like, that confused me. That's my only complaint.
Oh, well, I really loved the episode where they follow Jamie Tart around and he ends up going to his mother's house and they're in his childhood bedroom. What a moment, Jamie Tart, to have grown up and become best friends with his idol. Not only that, but like had fallen in love and been with this girl that was like the poster on his wall. But his relationship with her had evolved into friendship. That these two people were his friends. They were his best friends in the world who knew him and who cared enough about him to like chase him and like make sure he wasn't like depressed or jumping off bridges or whatever, right? I thought that was so beautiful. So it did bother me kind of like the bar scene fight at the like with him and Roy, because I felt like they were finally at the point where they were like actual friends and really cared about each other. So I felt the making Keeley decide thing was unnecessary, right? And then I think Schitt's Creek did a really good job of showing that the women didn't end up with the guy as part of the happy ending, right? You see, like, in Schitt's Creek, both the young females are off doing their own starting their own business and doing really well. And I love that. And, their relationships didn't come to fruition for, like, good reasons, and I didn't see that with Ted Lasso, where I thought they were just always trying to put Keeley in a relationship, whether it was with that woman Jack or whoever else, Keely was so focused on her business, she didn't really need any other relationship things going on. So I was a little bit kind of weirded by the way that Roy, Keely, and Jamie ended up at the end. I think it would have been perfect to just end it, their relationship, their story, the three of them, with just being best friends. I love the episode where they introduce Roy's sister for the second time. And, they're like, they have that playful, like, oh, your sister's really fit. And he's like, oh, you're my best friend. And they have this emotional moment. I think that was great. And I think it would have been just wonderful to just leave them as really great friends.
Yeah.
And Roy having to accept that. I don't think Jamie Tart needed to have been into that. I think Roy saying, oh, I still love Keely, and he can't get over it, and then going to therapy for it would have been enough.
Yeah.
I don't think he needed to have that fight with Jamie.
I'm glad you brought that up, the Roy part, because I feel like what that really showed was that Roy was not developed as much. Because we've been focusing on Jamie, we had this whole episode, we saw Jamie has grown so much, and I was realizing this, I'm we haven't really seen that for Roy this season. And I think that's what they were trying to say with everything, because I was thinking about, why would you add these scenes? And I think they were trying to say, especially that scene where that video was leaked of Keely and then Roy asked whose was it. I felt that was really uncomfortably out of character. Yeah. And I was just why would you add that? I was trying to figure this out. I'm I think they're trying to say that Roy's actually not that good. He's not been good for a while. And I've been trying to understand Roy's character, which is he's been one of my favorites. But I feel this season I couldn't tell what was going on with him. And I guess they were hinting at that he's been going through a lot. He just hasn't checked himself. Rebecca called him out a few times saying hey, are you just determined to get in your way all the time? So I love that they ended with him being in therapy. It made most sense. It made sense that Jamie would be with his father. It made sense that Keely would be working on her business. But I feel the stuff in between wasn't necessary. So, and I think they did that to show where Roy was. But I feel Jamie didn't need to backslide into the Roy and Keely drama. Mm-hmm. And it didn't, that felt out of place. And I guess they were trying to emphasize that Roy's really not that good. So I think maybe that's why. I don't know.
Which is fine. I think that emphasizing that Roy wasn't magically this perfect man or whatever is a great. Him having to go to therapy because he couldn't get over Keely and he made this bad decision or whatever, that's fine. Yeah. I get that. That makes sense to me. I just don't think that we should have made Jamie Tart slide back. And I'm a Jamie Tart stan, so maybe that's what it was. I just didn't want to see him falling back. Yeah,
they could have done it earlier or showed it differently. They just I don't know. It felt really unnecessary in the series finale, season finale, for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
One thing that I also want to talk about was Sam's storyline. Whether it was Sam with Rebecca or Sam with his restaurant, I feel we didn't finish Sam's story. Mm-hmm. Suddenly he's on a Nigerian team, it looks like.
That was so confusing.
Yeah.
But I was when was that an option? Because, that one billionaire guy just told him, hey, watch out. I swear I keep thinking I missed an episode. I was something happened that I didn't see.
No, you didn't. And I think in this case, it is just that they forgot things. They skipped things. They tried to move through things so much faster than they needed to, especially when you have a supersized season like they did. They had 12 episodes at an hour long or more. Some of them were 75 or 80 minutes. And there were so many unnecessary scenes throughout the entire season where I was why are we doing this? Why are we taking time to watch this? And Sam put his whole heart, his whole soul into Ola's, and then he just leaves to pursue. I mean, I get that it was always his dream to be, to play in his home country, but also, I don't know, there should have been a little bit more explanation. There should have been, I said, what should have happened was there should have been, when they were collecting money at the beginning of the finale and they were saying oh, we're going to buy a karaoke machine now. I was so sure that was going to be the send off for everyone, that Sam was going to announce he was going to go home to play on a Nigerian team, that they were all going to make give it a to sir with love moment for Ted. And, everybody gets that opportunity to say goodbye for these revelations to come out. There was nothing. There was no scene like that. And they wasted Sam's potential. I just keep going back to that. I really hope there's a spinoff or something coming, because otherwise, what happened?
I almost felt there was a time jump at the end. Like, I was
Yeah.
just assuming them, like, because, like, Beer got married, like, they
Which
showed all these
you
bunch
guys-
of things.
Do you guys believe that that's actually what happened? Because there's a faction that they think that's just what Ted is dreaming happened for these people.
So you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Scrubs original finale before
Yep.
the med school one, where he
That's
does
what
that
I
whole
said,
imagination.
right.
Yeah. I was like, it
I love
reminds
that.
me, and
I
that
love
was
that.
also
I
a
loved
time
that.
jump, but in his head, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
is that what's happening? So like, that's why I'm assuming it's a time jump, and if it's in Ted's head, that makes even more sense, because it's like so much doesn't make sense. Because like, how would he have, I was just like caught up in the logistics. I'm like, what about his restaurant? How did he get there? What about Richmond? Like, I'm so confused. So I'm assuming it's time jumps. I don't know. But in general, I've been kind of disappointed with Sam, because he started out so strong. He's another wasted potential, in my opinion. And nothing against him and the Rebecca storyline. Like, I may not ship them, but I just feel like he got like almost like he like got drowned in her storyline. Unfortunately, he lost his autonomy in her storyline, and they also hinted at that all season. By the way, like they
Like the matchbook. And
Yeah.
they had that cute. They were like looking at each other during watching Hugh Got Mail. So I'm just like, literally, they were just hinting at them the episode
nothing.
prior.
For nothing. And okay, listen, I know I'm coming across very conspiratorial, but I'm a truther now in this theory.
Yeah, we want to hear it now.
So Tohi Jabo, who plays Sam, obviously he's now in the Power, and I'm pretty sure they just got picked up for season 2. So it would be a send-off for him, a reason he couldn't come back for, say, another season. I'm just going full in on this conspiracy theory that they're not done, guys. I'm letting you know I fully subscribe to this train of thought. There's another season coming. There's a spinoff. Something is happening. It
can
makes
see
sense
that.
why they would send him away, though, without any explanation, too.
And I just feel like his story didn't wrap up for me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't see
Yeah,
what
I agree.
happened with all his activism, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it would have made sense for Sam to go on to become, maybe not necessarily like continue in football, but to become an activist, to use his business as like, you know, some power in the community to, you know, it made, I felt like there was a lot of wasted potential with Sam. And then I was a little bit confused with Danny Rojas and Zero's little interaction. So I did like the idea that, you know, Danny had a dark side and could be like terrifying if you were on the opposite team or if you were like, you know, on his bad side or something. So he wasn't this perfectly rosy character. But the fact that like something in the way, like the apology and then working it out felt so off to me that I was like, what's going on with Danny and Zero or Van Damme or whatever he was calling himself, Zora, the whole time? It just felt off to me. And I was like, why did they do this? Like, none of this makes sense. I didn't have an issue with like Danny having a little bit of a dark side or whatever. But something didn't add up to like when they started playing together again. Like there was no firm apology. Like, hey man, it was just soccer. Like I was just trying to like not be too friendly with you because we're on opposite teams. I don't know. Like something just felt off in that whole season with Danny.
I think it mirrored what like Hope said, that like a lot of scenes were used, but like they did a lot of these random storylines, but like why? Like, and that's like one of them. Like, why did you do that? What was that for? Where did that end up? Why didn't you use that time to maybe show Nate quitting or like, you know, I don't know, something with like Ted and Nate talking or something like that. It's just, I felt like they were trying to be funny and fun, and then it ended up taking away from story, unfortunately, in the process.
I agree with that, sadly.
So do you guys think that the series fulfilled the promises of the first season?
Okay, so this is a complicated question because like I go back and forth on like how I feel about it. Personally, I feel like something is often missing, but like I guess like because Ted Lasso has created such good characters and they have like this feeling of like, okay, we created people that like are trying to be better. Like I faked out they'll be better, but something just feels off. I don't know how to explain it. Like, and that like we just described, I feel like I wish we saw more this season. So maybe it's not the series finale's fault. I feel like it's the season 3's. Like I feel like season 3 was just lacking in general. Like I wish there were more episodes. There was like just more blanks filled. And so I think I'm more frustrated with like the overall how we got here, not necessarily where we're at.
I think that in a way it did because it stayed pretty heartwarming. It stayed pretty light. And it really did deliver the idea of sometimes when you run away from your problems, you have to go home to face the problems in certain ways. Obviously, the Michelle thing was not the case here. But I think season 3 was just so far off the mark that it feels like there were moments this season where I thought it felt like they were overdoing themselves. I don't know if you guys remember the scene in the locker room where everyone was like deleting the pictures, and that was a bad episode of television. Like I think I gave that 2.5 stars or something, where I was like, what were they doing? It felt so unnecessary, so out of place. And there's a I hesitate to say this, but I really do feel like they kind of forgot how men act sometimes. And there are really, really good men, not to get on my man-hating ways, my horse. But that was not necessary. It was not filled with any level of realism. And I just sat there thinking, like, what are we doing here with this episode, with this scene? It felt like a waste of my time. And when I said that I loved the show because it felt genuine, it felt like the opposite of that. It felt like they were just trying to push a PSA. And the PSA is right. Like, they were absolutely right about what they were saying, but the delivery was just bad. That was the one issue that I think I really had with season 3 not delivering on season 1 and 2's promise, because they've attacked some really tough issues, but not the way that they typically do this with this season.
I really agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that you make a really great point. And it was a lot of, like you said, PSAs, right? And I think that they had good intentions, but the delivery was not there.
I have a picture up on my wall over here. This is all a wall of photographs, like screen grabs from TV. And the one is when Ted is outside the club and he's having a panic attack. Rebecca's trying to watch him. It felt so real. I mean, if you've ever had a panic attack and someone has been near you, just having someone there to hold you feels so honest and so like they care for you, and they don't know how to help you, but they're going to be there for you. And that's the best way to tackle it. In this case, a lot of the issues they tackled this season just, forced. It felt forced. Like I'm glad they touched on these things where sometimes women and men, their nudes, their things like that, their private photos get leaked. But why did we address it that way? It should have been the fact that, like the Jack storyline would have been good enough. It didn't need to involve the players. And maybe they could have touched on it with the players and just been like, this hurt someone we really love, and we should think about this moving forward. Just sitting there and watching everyone delete it. Like Jack telling her, like, maybe you should feel a little ashamed, and Keely being like, no, I don't. That was beautiful. That was moving. But then watching, oh gosh, I forgot what the captain's name is.
McAdoo?
Yeah, watching him go through everyone's phone, I was like, why? And then the whole thing with oh my God, what is his name? I'm forgetting everyone's names, guys. I'm so sorry. Colin, where he grabbed Colin's phone. And look, I was like, why?
I hated that that's how he came out. I hated that that's how he came out. Like, that was his coming out to McAdoo. I'm like, of all ways, really? I felt like it was such a disservice to, like, Andy. It was just, like, his relationship with Trent, which, by the way, they, like, completely left that out. That was, like, one of my favorite things was Trent Krim and Colin's relationship. They completely sidelined that by the end of it.
Yeah.
I hated that he came out that way. Like,
and then
his friend going through his phone.
We didn't even get to see Colin come out to his teammates. We saw them shift away, and then they come back and they're all like, we love you, dude. I wanted to see him have this real raw emotional moment, because that actor, he's really good at what he was doing throughout the entire season. I would have loved to see a scene like that. That was a 2 minutes worth putting in the show that I would have gladly watched an extra 2 minutes just to watch their reaction.
Colin's coming out was the same thing Euphoria did, by the way. That just saying.
What?
So Ted Lasso pulled a Euphoria in that moment. Colin's coming out was something that Euphoria also did. So it's just like, that's why another reason why I didn't say well. I mean, like, it's supposed to be better than shows like Euphoria, but you're doing the same thing that, like, these other shows have done. Like, going through someone's phone is something that other shows do to expose people. So I don't know.
And, like, Isaac McAdoo, like, fighting the fan, right? I think that if he had walked in on Isaac kissing another dude, and then the fan was making those comments, and Isaac fought him and said, oh, well, what if one of us, not outing Colin, right? But like just kind of defending his teammate, I think would have made more sense than the whole seeing the nudes on his phone.
Yeah.
I agree.
Like, and also there was a lot of really great kind of callbacks in the series finale to like some of the earlier episodes. And I thought that was very sweet, but some of them did feel forced. Like, I feel like they had a checklist.
Yeah, the season's been doing that all season, so I felt like they felt more pressure to do it a lot more in the series finale too.
Yeah.
I hesitate to say this. I was going to make a video about it, but I decided not to. But like, I don't want to compare this to like How I Met Your Mother or Game of Thrones. But like, there's just certain shows that have been out for like 9 years. They have a big, like, there's a lot of pressure to deliver on a series finale in the final season. And I feel like Ted Lasso felt prey to that. I think that because like it came out during COVID, a lot of people didn't know about it. Then with the Emmy wins and then everyone binging it, like the fan base is huge now for Ted Lasso. So I almost feel like they felt pressure to be something to the fans, and like they almost, I don't know, they just felt like they were trying really hard to be what they were essentially to everyone. And I felt like they had a lot of pressure on themselves to do a lot and be a lot and force things and then try to be happy. And I could just see with the series finale, like they just tried to, there's a lot of pressure and hype for the finale to end perfectly.
Yeah.
And I could feel it for them.
I think comedies have a different standard for endings than dramas do, because dramas, there's a certain level of acceptance we as a viewer have to have in terms of feeling dissatisfied or feeling incomplete. Like, when I initially watched the Succession finale, I was like, this is so stupid. We don't get to see if Kendall jumps in the Hudson. We don't know where all these people go after this. And then I watched it a second time and I was like, no, wait, this is perfect. Like, you have to live in the discomfort of knowing that you have a general idea of where these characters go after this, but you don't know, like, do Tom and Shiv end up in this completely, disgusting cycle of Shiv thinks she's puppeting Tom, but then Tom also, like, there's a certain level of not knowing that we have to accept as drama viewers, that as comedy viewers, we want everything to be wrapped up so perfectly. We want everyone to get their little happy ending. And Barry I won't even get into the Barry finale, but I will say that I think, like Maria said earlier, they bit off so much in this season and in the show that they realized in the last couple episodes, they're like, we have a lot to wrap up here. And it didn't end up working out. I think they tried to do too much in the end. And I'm really sad because I really was hoping, I think if everyone else could have gotten the Ted finale minus Michelle, I would have been really happy. But unfortunately, that just did not happen.
All shows cannot be that one episode of Scrubs with the, future thing. They can't all be that. I get it. I think that overall Ted Lasso has a lot to offer, even though it ended so weird. I am grateful for the show because, like we talked about before, it's got so much joy and so much, hope and, and that like feeling of wanting to be a better person. And I think that the season finale was just it.
Yeah, I think if you can take, it is the idea of if you can take one moment or one thing away, like, even if you have a really bad day, but you have one thing that really made you laugh or made you smile. And for me, that moment in the series finale where the one guy in the airport is taking an Ussie and he says wicked, and Ted responds Pinky Boost. Like, I choked. The theater kid in me just like, the laugh I did was nasty. It was guttural. It was so loud. And I'm trying to remember the series finale in that way, because that, there were so many moments that this show gave us like that I'm going to just remember it in a positive light. I'm going to forget all the bad things and just remember the good.
As Jamie stands, what I'm holding on to is Jamie visiting his dad at rehab and giving him the, it wasn't Pride and Prejudice. What was it? Like the book that Ted gave him. And you can see that he read it so many times by that point. So yeah, that's like what I'm holding on to. I'm like Jamie's story. So the finale had good moments for sure.
Yeah.
before we sign off, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about? Because I know that we could talk about Ted Lasso for like another 2 hours, but like, is there anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
I just want to agree with you, Hope, that you kept saying conspiracy, but like I agree that there's probably going to be a spinoff or something. I don't know. Something just feels like this isn't really the end. So I'm expecting some sort of like Richmond-based like continuation happening, at least one season.
Like the spinoff thing, I did see, back on my conspiratorial bullshit. Did you guys see my tin hat is on. Did you guys see the one picture on Twitter about May, who she adjusts the picture at the end, and it was the one guy who he had like cowboy attire on inside the bar?
No,
did you see this?
I did not see this.
Okay.
I did not dismiss this.
If you watch through it one more time, in the very last shot we see of them in the bar with May, she adjusts the picture frame. It's the exact same picture that Sam adjusts at the end of Cheers, the very, very finale of Cheers. And people are saying Cheers spawned one of the most successful spinoffs of all time, Frasier.
Yeah.
So, which was announced after Cheers ended. But other than that, no, I was just going to say that I'm really glad Ted Lasso came into this world and brought so much joy in the time that it did. I do, like I said, I really hope that there's still that spinoff. But if not, I'm just going to try and take away the good, and I'll have to do a rewatch. I wonder if I'll be more critical or less critical on a rewatch of the third season, because, you know, taking it one episode at a time, it was really something. But I think that they really nailed some episodes, and then some episodes were just, so. In the meantime, I'm going to watch Shrinking. I'm going to fully dive in on that one.
I highly recommend Acapulco if you need something on Apple TV that's lighthearted and sweet. It's based in the 80s in Mexico. It's, as far as like being authentic to Mexican culture, it's amazing. And it's, you know, got a lot of funky clothes and like old 80s music, and it's funny and lighthearted, and I really enjoy it. So need something Ted Lasso-ish.
I will add one more quick thing, that I think Ted Lasso really needs to get its flowers, because in the case of Apple TV, I think they put that streaming service on the map. There are so many incredible shows coming out of Apple TV now that I don't know would have ever gotten the green light without a show like Ted Lasso performing the way it did. So thank you, Ted Lasso, for that, because some of my favorite shows already this year, and in the past 3 years, Schmigadoon, Shrinking,
After Party is coming out.
The
After Party. You'll say After Party is what I'm looking forward to with Apple TV. I love season 1, so I'm excited about that. I think it's coming out in June, actually. So
July.
Oh, July. Okay, so they keep pushing it, so I'm excited about that. But Severance was so good, and like I think Severance was like the best. Like Severance was like the best. Like what came out last year, right? Yeah, it was like the best show I watched last year. So I'm like, that wouldn't have happened without Ted Lasso. I agree.
Yeah.
Also, Loot with Maya Rudolph.
Oh, I need to watch that.
That was so good.
That one's fun.
Oh, I need to watch that.
I binged it in like a day. It was fun. All right. Well, then I think that this is going to wrap up this episode of the Temple of Geek podcast. I just want to thank you guys for being guests on the podcast today. Do you want to tell people where to find you on social media?
Like I said earlier, my name is Maria Watches Everything. I'm mostly on TikTok. You can find me on Instagram and YouTube, but it's not as much on TikTok. I do like deep dives into shows. And yeah, I do have playlists for every show I watch. I'm keeping up, and also a lot of fandom stuff. I'm getting back into Star Wars, so expect more Star Wars content in the next few months.
And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Hope Sloop, and on TikTok at Hope Sloop Entertainment. I will continue doing TV shows, but in the meantime, until July 21st, I am going to be focused on this film. Thank you, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach. So if you guys like Barbie coverage, please tune in. I am doing as much coverage as I can. So we'll see. Hopefully this movie does not disappoint.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today, especially our guests for being with us today. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, or Facebook by using the handle Temple Geek. Do you want to check out some of our other episodes or shows? Why don't you head on over to templeofgeek.com. There you'll find all sorts of content that pertains to the world of geek.
Please follow us on Twitter at Temple of Geek. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Temple of Geek. And remember to visit templeofgeek.com, your one stop for all things geek.
Goodbye.
This will conclude our transmission.